Okay.
Hello, welcome. You can see I'm Narwhal. I'm here. I'm not on camera. This is a just audio, and I want people to focus on the video game. This video game is called Phenix Corrupta, and I have with me the developer of the game who did all the art and all the programming, all the graphics, and all the music. The music's really great too. How's it going, Casper?
It's going well. Well, the
Yeah.
music was actually not by me. It's by my wife, Alisa.
Oh yeah. Because last time I talked to you, you guys were engaged, but now you
Yes.
got married, so that's
Oh, yeah,
cool.
it's true. It's
And
it's quite a while ago.
yeah, and that was when Alisa was just getting released. We were kind of chatting around then. We talked because it's like we want to do a comic sooner or later based on your video games, and I would help with the comic aspect of it. And it's kind of back burner for both of us. We chat here and there, and then in the meantime, I just really am a fan of your games. I think a lot of people are. That's one of the things I want. So your name's Casper CROES, and
Hmm.
then you're originally from Belgium, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. And you moved to Japan.
Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
this interview is just me asking you yes or no questions that you can then confirm.
okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
Um,
actually, my last name is pronounced as Cruz.
oh,
So
okay,
more
Casper
like
Cruz.
Cruz, you know?
Yeah, like Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That's a cool name. You didn't have to make because it's like a comic book name. Kind of it has the alliteration and stuff. It's like you
Mm.
could be a comic book character.
Well, it's just because many native English speakers would pronounce my last name as Crows. So mostly on the stream, I have to say like, no, it's Cruz.
Yeah, yeah. So your wife is Alisa, and she's based loosely off the character in Alisa.
Hmm.
Right? Yeah, cool. And then she helps with the music and voice acting. But I don't know if there's any voice acting in Phoenix Corrupta because it's MSX.
Yeah, it's all 8-bit sounds, so it's not really
Yeah,
possible to do voice acting.
yeah. So I have a kind of I don't know if it's a lot of questions, and I'm like, where do I even start? But one question is like, tell me a little bit of how the Elisa launch has gone because it seems like it's gone. From what I can tell, it's gone pretty quite well, right? Like you get a lot of the big stream horror streamers have all played it, and that's kind of exciting.
Hmm. It went pretty well, apart from the first release. It was very buggy, the game, because I really didn't have time to test it enough. Um, I was really rushed at the end because I was out of budget. Um, so it was not a very good launch, but like over time I got everything updated, and then I kind of launched like again,
Oh
kind
yeah,
of launch with the developer's cut version, which added everything I couldn't add in the original version. Um, I think that did a lot. I think there are still bugs in the game, but at a certain point I have to kind of give up.
yeah. Real quick, what's on the screen right here? So this is Phoenix Corrupta. This part I kept getting stuck at. I was so dumb. It's like embarrassing sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm sure people were yelling at the screen. And I figured it out later. You can just run up and then duck and it will go past you. And then you stand up and then
Yeah.
you run past it. But I kept trying to jump it and I died like 3 times in a row. So we're going to watch that just while we talk. We're not me die 3 times in a row in a stupid way. But we'll see the title screen is amazing too for Phoenix Corrupta. And Alisa has really cool title screen kind of cinematic stuff too, where you kind of use the deliberate PlayStation kind of graphics. Is
Hmm.
that what do you work in Blender? I forget if we talked about that.
Yeah. So I make everything in Blender.
Cool. So what is that like level of polygons for the specifically for the Phoenix Corrupta title screen?
Hmm. It's all kind of high poly, but not like extremely high poly. You would be able to if you saw it in high resolution, you would almost be able to see the polygons. But like these graphics are possible like in a AAA game or something. So it's not extremely high poly.
Yeah.
But for like this low resolution pixelated graphics, it does not really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking with Alisa that you make the backgrounds and they don't look good until you make them lower resolution. And then all of a sudden they look really good. And that's true. Like it totally fits. I can see that with this a little bit. It's like part of the charm is the low resolution is what makes it look really nice.
Yeah.
It makes it look like clay almost kind of. You know who did that is like Diablo 1 in the 90s. They kind of did that style where they used 3D models and made sprites out of them. But the 3D models were like high res for the time. But since they were just getting converted to sprites, they could make it higher than normal. And it had that cool kind of like almost clay-ish type look to it.
Yeah. I really like those graphics. It's like
Yeah.
the original Fallout. I really like these.
Oh yeah.
Graphics.
Yeah, that's an era. That's like a big influence to you, would you say?
Yeah, quite.
Is that the era that you grew up? Like, that's the nostalgic, like, were you like a kid? Were you 10 years old when Fallout came out or something?
It was actually, I think I was really young at that moment. Maybe I was like 5 years old, maybe. But my oldest brother, he's like 10 years older than me. He had a PC and he used to play all these games like Duke Nukem 3D and Doom and Fallout and stuff. And
Nice.
I used to watch it, so I kind of grew up with it. I didn't play them until I was the right age for it. But
Yeah, that even more can feed that nostalgia. And I was just thinking, I'm like, so that does seem like that's the era to almost be the best influenced by, because we kind of romanticize it, but that era of gaming is really classic and really like timeless. And one of the things too, I'm thinking like even with Doom, it was like 5 people made Doom in 1 year, and it's like the all-time classic game. And the games aren't like that anymore. Like AAA, it takes $100 million. It takes like 50 people working 3 years or something. And so then kind of getting back to that, you're influenced by that. And then you're a solo developer doing the art and the programming and like, everything else with some help from your wife. So you're kind of bringing us back to that era, which is cool. Do you ever like fantasize about what you do if you had a team and at various levels, like a 5-person team or like a AAA 50-person team? Do you ever think about anything like that?
sometimes I think at a certain point I should hire people. But right now I think I don't earn enough money with my games to pay for these people. But I think I can work with like freelancers. I think that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
So if I'm missing some work power or something, like I cannot do certain things, then I would just go for a freelancer, because then I don't have to keep paying them for something small.
Yeah, because that could be an issue that comes up that's something that people talk about is like scaling. And you hear all these almost like horror stories too of like a game is a hit and then so they expand and they build a team, and then sooner or later the founders of the game company get like kicked out of the company. Like I feel like that happened to Bungie kind of,
Yeah.
And then and not only Bungie, but I mean maybe Blizzard and whatever, a lot of the classic ones. And so it's just funny. I've noticed with I've been dabbling with some animation, and I have noticed that just getting one extra person to help with on the project is kind of cool because it sort of doubles the rate of speed. Like if you go from 2 to 3, you actually don't double, so you don't get quite that rush. But if you go from 1 to 2, you're like we're in business. Like we're getting stuff done here. We do have, by the way, we have some people filtering into the chat, hanging out. Thanks everyone for being here. We got Facundo Ezekiel. How's it going, man? He's a great artist too from South America. We got Cool Teen. What's up, man? Dale A. How's it going? Holy Hand Grenades. 9 people watching. More people will catch this later. I'm glad to have you on the channel, Casper. This is some of my favorite content, just because I'm personally very interested in it. I'm really fascinated with how creative video games are, but then how different they are too. Like even even for the story, like I don't know, like it's so different to write for a video game than for a comic, but it's equally creative and equally fun. And I don't know, we're just seeing on screen now, speaking of, this is almost like part of the writing, but the moment in Phenix Corrupta, and then of course the game over, but the moment you get your first power up and you become like the powered up Phoenix like demon chick, that like feels really awesome. Like you however you structured the game, you structured it so that when that power up happens, the player kind of feels like they feel pumped up, you know, because they've been kind of struggling for a bit. Is that stuff that you like plan, and is that part of the game design, to think of like you're trying to picture the emotions of the player as they play, kind of thing?
I actually don't know. I had the idea of like making a Metroidvania, but I had to strip it down because of time. And I wanted the player to be this character, this demon woman. But I like you don't start as it. That wouldn't make much sense. Maybe it would be kind of alienating for the player. So you have to start with something like human, and then you get it. But it has to be in the beginning, because otherwise it's like half of the game, or just by the end of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me too. I'm a little all over the place, but the fact that you moved to Japan is kind of awesome too. And I have some questions about that. And one of them is like, are you a fan of manga and anime and Japanese like media in general? And does that influence your work at all? So that's one question.
I kind of like the old anime and mangas, I guess. I didn't read much mangas. Here is going to be even more difficult because my Japanese is not that great. But like I don't watch much new anime. I mostly watch anime that only like until 2000.
Yeah.
You will sometimes hear my cat in the background.
Yeah, she's cute. A Japanese cat.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a Russian cat. It's
nice.
Siberian.
That's awesome. She's come all around the world then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of the influence, and so why did you move to Japan? Just cause like adventure, or was there a specific reason, or a job, or what?
It's actually because my wife Alisa, she's Japanese, and we wanted to live more closer to her family, and also Europe and mostly Belgium. Financially is becoming kind of a hell to live there, so Japan was way better for business. I have to pay less tax on everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's mostly the reason why.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. One thing I'm noticing too, we're watching this video, so we're in the blue area now. And that's like a subtle subconscious thing that a lot of games do to like make you feel progress and feel like change as you're going through. Is that something that you consciously figured out from an early stage, or how do you think about that when you're designing a game?
Yeah, that is indeed something like you feel like you're going forward. It's also because it might get boring if it's always the same. So you need like a little bit of change in theme. It's also good for the eyes to switch from very red to blue, and then later there's green. Um,
Yeah, and does this like is this sort of influenced too just by the MSX? Like, how was that? Like, so a little bit different line of questioning here. Like, did you
Mhm.
play MSX when you were a kid, or were you familiar with it? And then what led you to? Is this a contest, right, for MSX development? What led you to enter this contest?
So I first started with it's kind of a long story with that I got kind of introduced at a certain point to Commodore 64, and I made a game, small game for it in BASIC, and while I was doing that, I kind of discovered the MSX, and I was like, I have to get this and make something for it because it looks so cool. But yeah, time passed really like quick, and then when I was in Japan, I could get an MSX2, uh, and then I made this actually. And the contest, I actually didn't know anything about it until I was like halfway done with it, and I had
Oh, cool.
maybe 2 months left uh, until the submission would close. So I had to rush to get this done. Uh, yeah. So
Nice.
yeah.
When does the contest? When do you know who won? Because I feel like you have a chance of winning.
Um, they said that it will be known somewhere in November, but I don't know if it's beginning or mid or like end of November.
Okay.
Um, I think a lot of games that enter the contest, they are more technically better. I think like this game is very basic because it's my first game and I didn't know like how to really make something like technically amazing.
Is
Um,
it is it kind of like Alisa where you get a lot of your inspiration from the idea of kind of what is it called, like the format, like Alisa has the format of a Resident Evil style game, and then once you know you're working within that, then you get a lot of the inspiration. And for this it's kind of similar. It's like you're like a Metroidvania for the MSX, and then it takes shape in your mind more immediately. Is that something that happened, or is that something that fuels your inspiration a lot of the time, or is there other aspects?
mm, I think my biggest inspiration was Metroid on the NES.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I wanted to make something at least of that quality, visual quality at least, um, and but like a completely different theme. Otherwise, I'm making just Metroid MSX, which
Yeah.
could also be nice, but less original, of course.
Yeah. And where do you keep like a notebook where you're like, demon girl, I want to do a game about her, or like, because you could have done sci-fi, and then like Elisa has kind of a specific idea for its design and style too. It's, I don't know how you describe it. It's actually really cool how original it is. And this too, even though they're like, I don't know if there's a way where you could pitch it where it's like, oh, it's a basic demon girl, but you're like, no, it's kind of cool. It has its own style. Um,
Mhm.
does that, like, do you keep a sketchbook, or where does a lot of your uh, idiosyncrasies of that kind of come from?
I keep everything in. I think I write some kind of design document in a TXT file, uh, where I just write all the basics down and I keep expanding on it. Uh, yeah. So, and while I make it, things change and it gets more personality.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is pretty interesting. So is the when you're writing a game, a lot of it is that initial design document, and it starts kind of simple. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, yeah, so with, I guess, and then as things change, it's like as you're programming it, making art, a lot of things kind of change. Is it stuff that you can't even predict? Does it change like a lot, or does it change just a little bit sometimes?
Sometimes it can change a lot. For example, I wanted to have a boss in every area, but there was no time for it, so I scrapped that. And then I wanted to have just one last boss, but there was no time for it, so I completely scrapped bosses.
What
Um,
what is bolt? Oh yeah,
yeah,
bosses. Yeah.
boss battle.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? That gives it a feel that's kind of cool that it doesn't have boss battles. And I was thinking like, oh, if you ever make a bigger version, that might be the first thing you add. But as this like little fun game that it took me 2 hours to beat, so it's like it feels like a full real game. Like, or especially if you compare it to the MSX or the Nintendo, it's like just as long as those ever were.
Hmm.
And it has a cool, complete feeling. And also just the feeling of the ending. And you told me too, there's three different endings, and I just saw one, and they're based. It's kind of fun how the logic for it is based on how long you take to beat the game, and then that corresponds to in real life how long after her death she would come back.
Yeah.
So like this, if you see the first ending, you get to see her right after the death on the scene of the death, which I won't say
Mhm.
what it is, although maybe we could. But and then if you get the middle ending, you'll see her like in in the morgue, which maybe that is whatever, not exactly spoiler. And then the one that I showed is if you wait too long, then it's by that time she's been buried. So then she's in the grave. So that
Mhm.
there's some kind of fun creativity to that even. Um, yeah. So you make the design document and then you kind of just jump in. With MSX, was there so you because with even with Alisa, you kind of had to teach a lot of that stuff to yourself from the ground
Mhm.
up. Um, and a lot of it is like that one you can like look at Resident Evil and how they do it, and getting the pre-rendered backgrounds, getting the polygons on the characters and the running animation and the tank controls. Like you get to look at that and kind of figure out how to do it step by step. So in that, did that make it a good like first game to do kind of?
I think every time I make a game, um, I choose a concept that is a little bit way too big for my
Yeah.
knowledge. But I think that's the best lesson. You can learn so many things in one go. Um, like if I made a smaller game than Alisa, I wouldn't have known uh, so much at once. And with this one too, it's kind of a big game with many features. Um, and yeah, there was actually a lot to learn here too. Not really in graphics. It was more like converting graphics and learning the limitations of the system. It was also written, I mean, completely made in an engine that is C based. So it's not like I learned machine code or something. Um, so it was written in C. I didn't have a whole lot of experience in C. Um, so I had to learn that too. And luckily, there is a Discord community that could help me with it.
Oh,
So
cool.
a lot of thanks to these people that I could make this and their patience with me because I had so many noob questions and
Yeah, that's cool, and that's even kind of interesting to hear too. It's that's cool that they are patient and nice to. Would you say that the Discords like that for the programmers? They're out there to help, and they don't like make fun of you or get annoyed by you. If anyone else was trying to jump in and learn some of this stuff.
Mhm. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
cool.
probably like I'm probably like the kid of the server, you know. I like uh, generally 20 years younger than everybody on on the Discord.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean it's MSX. It's like so old. It's like
Yeah,
that.
it's
Why?
like a system of the 80s. So
Yeah. Nice. By the way, we got 18 people watching. More people filtering in. Thanks for coming in, guys. We're not pimping comics today. We're just, if anything, we're pimping Alisa. You can go check it out and buy it. It's the Resident Evil style game that kind of made a pretty huge splash. All the horror streamers played it. And then Casper followed it up with this, maybe you could call it a smaller project, but it's a full game in its own right. And it's this MSX cool Metroidvania called Phenix Corrupta, which even the title's cool. Like Phenix Corrupta meaning like there's this concept of her maybe coming back, but coming back corrupted. And it's kind of, she falls down when the game starts. You kind of feel like she's kind of in the underworld or whatever and sort of trying to escape. And she gets this power up. And so, yeah, all those concepts are fun. And that was something too, like, it's just a MSX game. So there's not a crazy like story really. There's I don't think there's any dialogue. There's no boss battles, but there is kind of a story.
Dialogue.
Yeah, you're right. There's dialogue when she gets powers. She talks.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were thinking about maybe trying to make a comic out of this and or Alisa, but either one really. And it is something that I think will make happen sooner or later. It's a little bit kind of waiting for the time to strike, waiting for inspiration and exactly how to go about it. But that's even in its own right is kind of exciting and fun to even think about. It is a very graphic game, and you have a cool graphic style. I don't know, one thing is like you actually know how to put hot girls in your games. That's like becoming a lost art. That's funny. It's like only indie games can do that now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Though maybe my next games I'm going to make more male protagonists, because otherwise I do too much female characters and it starts to get suspicious or something,
Yeah. People will be like, "What? Why are you making every time it's a hot girl? Come on, Casper."
Yeah.
Nice. What about Alisa sales? I'm a little curious about that. Like, do you feel like telling like specific numbers? Like, did it sell like 1,000? Like, for example, with comics, selling 1,000 comics is like actually pretty good. But I feel like you sold more than that because it's like it's getting reviewed on all the streams and stuff. Like, about what are those numbers doing for the overall sales of Alisa?
I would actually have to check, but I think at good moments it can sell like 10 copies a day or something.
Okay,
and it's
cool.
been out for quite a while, so I don't know.
Yeah,
it's quite, and during sales it sells pretty well too. Yeah, but of course with a discount. Like right now it's on sale. So whoever wants to buy it, it's very cheap now. It's like $10, I think.
Yeah. On Steam, you can get it for the Halloween sale. So yeah, anyone watching, like, if you're into Resident Evil, it's just a Resident Evil style game, like super original in its own right. A lot of people in the reviews, they say like it's not really like, because you see some games and they're kind of like, I don't know, they're imitating that old style, but it's not exactly like that. It's almost like a time machine, and you kind of built it that way. Like you didn't really use like anything that would be modern. Like it's even at, like what the resolution is at, like 360 by 480 or whatever PlayStation. Yeah. And that's like definitely a lot of the fun. Is there anything else like that so I remember too, in our first interview, I did find this pretty fascinating and sort of relatable, but you mentioned that there was a first game even before Alisa that you were working on, but that one was like a little more ungainly and crazy, and you didn't really know what it was while you were working on it. and it sort of dead ended. But you ended up learning a lot and enough of a base to then, once you thought of Alisa, then you could really jump in, and then you really did have a vision for Alisa. So it's sort of like we sometimes pick a opening project without a vision and learn a lot, but it never becomes anything. Is that true? Did that kind of happen to you for the one
Hmm.
before Alisa?
Yeah, I had actually quite a lot of projects. Mostly it stopped with just graphics because I didn't know how to do programming. Um, so yeah, before that I was a very overambitious sci-fi multiplayer game, like yeah, something overambitious. And actually, Alisa was also overambitious, but at least I could finish that.
And it
uh,
was, and in a way, I mean, it was overambitious, but it also isn't if you look at it like, I don't know. I mean, it's for one person, it's super ambitious, but it's very simplified. And just being able to simplify it, that's like a creativity in itself. That reminds me, it's funny, that almost doesn't apply to comics. Like comics, you don't really need to simplify. Usually they can be crazy, but
mhm.
animation and movies, it always is pretty good to simplify stuff. And it can be cool to simplify in comics too. I actually do like to do that, but like for movies specifically, you have to write within the budget. You can't write crazy stuff, especially if you're just an indie movie. And those constraints end up being like forcing you to be more creative a lot of time. Did you find that happened at all with Alisa?
um, I think, for example, like a movie and a comic, um, I think it's not good if it gets too long. But for a game, it's better if it's long. Um, but for one person, it's very difficult to make something long and that still feels fun to play. Um, so you have to like squeeze a lot of inspiration out of you and then work time um, to make that possible. Um, but I found like a way to make it like you can make a game that is short, but you can play for a while by making many like unlockables or something. You have to play the game again to
Yeah,
get
like
everything out
alternate
of it.
endings. Yeah.
Yeah, and like yeah, like small unlocks. Like for example, like in Alisa, you can unlock many like different like costumes and stuff like they used to do in PS2 games a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and in this game, I'm also going to release a new version that has some bug fixes. Uh, and I'm going to add some more like bonus passwords that you can use to have some extras to the game too. Yeah.
Cool. Is that when you release it? Is it because right now within this contest you can play it for free, and that's what we're
Mhm.
watching. So anyone watching right now, the link is on Casper's Twitter and on mine. You might have to scroll down just a little bit, but maybe did I might have posted it in the description. But but that's like, shoot, what was I saying? Where you can play it. Um,
You
I
can
don't know.
play
I'm
it for
forgetting.
free
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the
Are
website.
you going to charge money when you release it, or is it going to be for free?
It's going to be a free game. We're going to stay free. Um, but if there is a publisher interested in this game, then I might want to turn this into a physical game. Um, like I don't really want to have much money out of it. Like it's fine if they want to give me some money, like a share. But if they can make it cheap, like sell it for cheap, that would be very nice because then more people can play it.
Cool. Yeah, you're very generous with not being super wanting to make a lot of money right away. You were like that with the comics too. You're like, yeah, you said I can make the comic. I don't have to pay you anything for the rights or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but so are you? That's kind of like a phase of your career almost in a way. Is like, are you still in the phase where you just want as many people playing it as possible. I can kind of relate to that with comics too. Like you could make a decision. Actually, it's funny with comics. There's some psychology to it where if you give it away for free, and sometimes you have less readers because it feels less precious and more throwaway. But then if you charge just a little bit, then it feels precious and people do want to read it.
Then yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, and like so. Or sorry, what were you gonna say?
Like people would think that there's low quality or something if it's free, and they don't want to go in.
Yeah, so you can almost consider that with Phenix Corrupta. I was gonna say, like, if you want to charge $5 or whatever, definitely go for it. But I also understand, and you can make any decision you want, obviously. But but that is cool. The prospect of possibly giving it a physical release, that would be a lot of fun. And I think there is a market for that. I feel like I might be in that market. Like if it was Kickstarted or something and came in a cool box and whatever. Let me read this real fast. We got a super chat from Maddock. He goes, coming late. Thank you for having devs on. NAR innovates. CG. What coding challenges MSX2 coded on one virtual machine? What are tech limitations that make it an MX2 game rather than a Commodore 64 or an IBM compatible? What about that last part? Can you answer that, Casper?
So I made the game in a C-based engine called MSXGL. So basically, you can write everything in C and then compile it to a game. I don't know much about these technical things, and I also think that C64 has such C-based engine somewhere. But for some reason, I like MSX, and now I live in a country where MSX was kind of a big thing. C64 is almost impossible to find here. I wrote it on PC, so I didn't do it on the machine itself, though my small basic game for the C64 was made on a C64, completely in BASIC, which was quite a challenge. I always had to save on the cassette tape, and once it got corrupted, and that was not so nice. And yeah, so I don't know if I answered the whole question. I don't know if there was something.
Oh, I think that's good. Yeah, I think that answers all his questions.
Tech limitations. It's like I guess it's like MSX2 is like a NES, I guess, but slightly less powerful.
Okay.
In certain aspects.
Yeah, a lot of games for MSX got like ported to the NES back in the day.
Also, many people see the MSX as like something really like weak. It's actually because many developers back in the day, they made a version, like a game port for the ZX Spectrum, or I don't know what it's called, the Z80, or and then they made like a cheap port to the MSX, but it didn't run well because they could just convert the code. But it was a completely different machine.
Yeah, like MSX can't scroll, right? But you like, for example, you don't do that.
It can.
Okay.
But on the MSX1, it's very choppy. So there are some games that can scroll, but the sprites scroll at a smoother rate than the tiles. For example, here, I wanted to have more than 2 colors per tile. Like you can see, I'm using 3 colors actually. Like for now, I use black, dark green, and light green.
Cool.
But if you want only 2 colors, like if 2 colors was okay, then I could make smooth scrolling. Then these screens wouldn't take so long to show up. but I'm using like a bitmap mode, so it can actually have 16 colors per tile, but that would be a little bit too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That is interesting. And yeah, like because it's running. This is a little bit interesting too. I noticed is the way you play it is through an MSX emulator in the browser. So it's not like, oh, our new computers can do that old stuff so fast. It's like, no, it has all the limitations even when you do it here. Like you can see when you change screens, it does take like, I don't know, a third of a second or 2/10 of a second to load the screen. And that's just because because of the emulator being like real or whatever, the actual
Yeah.
game itself. That's cool. Cool Teen says, I've never been into indie games until I stumbled on all these people making new games for old systems. So many brilliant people. It does when he says it like that, I'm like, oh, there are a fair amount of examples of this. And there's that kind of that nostalgia, and it is a fun package to kind of get inspired by and jump in and make a project. Are you that familiar with like that kind of scene? Like what for the Nintendo they had what's it called? There was one like Ultra Boy or something that was kind of like Mega Man. That was kind of a lot of fun. It's not Ultra Boy, but it's kind of like that. Chat might know. But or let me
remember.
yeah. Like what about this? Like, oh yeah. So because you even tweeted that you might want to try and do that maybe for a PS2 thing. How real is that, or is that just kind of a pipe dream? Are you really pursuing that?
For PS2, well, I got this funny basic studio, which is just like making games, like doing your own homebrew on the PS2. It only released in Japan, so not a lot of like YouTubers covered this. So it's kind of interesting. I tried it a little bit, but it's not for commercial use. Like the game saves on a memory card.
And there's no way
and
to get it like on Steam or whatever.
no. But there are some tools out there to make real PS2 games. So maybe one day I'll try this, but there is no. It's a bit of a difficult console because you need like a modded console or soft mod or for the PS2. So it's not for anybody who has a PS2. For example, this one is for everybody who has an MSX. It would just run.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a little different. One thing, Simply Green mentions old school physical media, story, artwork, physical has value, digital does not, in my opinion. That made me think. I was like, and you mentioned maybe getting a publisher. I'm like, I wonder you could look into something like that for Alisa, if for it to have a physical release at some point. Have you ever thought about that?
There is actually a publisher working on a console port. They mentioned that they could do a physical release, but I will still like wait and see what they announce. It's not really like my right to say what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm still waiting for that to happen, for them to get the news out. Many people keep asking about like when is it coming to console. So I'm just waiting for them to announce it. So hopefully that becomes real, like this physical release. But of course, it's gonna be for Switch and PS4, 5, and Xbox.
Cool. Yeah. So the fact, because you did the initial release that had some bugs, and then you did a developer release that was more well received, and also it feels like, especially for indie stuff, they almost expect that, and it's not like they hold it against you. Really, people kind of are used to games getting a soft release, then getting bugs fixed, then getting a major release. Um, but then you get released on the Switch. Like it's this rolling release that continues and continues, and like the sales don't exactly necessarily die. Like I guess that's could be sort of true of comics too. It's like if you make a game, you get to sell it for the rest of your life, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so you're going to build up your library when you have 3, 4, 5 games in 10 years or whatever. Then you'll really have a cool catalog going. And then maybe it is at some point it will be time for you to like start hiring people and making more and more games.
So actually my plan is to have, but before I become 40, I want to have at least 10 games released. So now I'm almost at 2 when this one is finished, and I'm still 30. I'm almost 31. So
Cool.
yeah, I want a lot of games released because I have so many ideas, and I don't want to like not being able to make everything. I don't know if that sentence sounds right. Like I want to make everything that I come up with.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that with comics. Even it's like you're like, oh, I want to make this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. You're like, oh crap, that I might be 60 by the time they're all done. But yeah, and yeah, like so if it's a game a year, or even you get close to that goal, and the games they're interesting because they're full games, kind of from like the 90s model. Like I was saying, like if it was 5 people working on one game for a year, then you have Doom. And Alisa like a couple years, or how long was that development cycle?
Alisa took actually a little way too long. I think I've been working on it for 6 years, 5 years for the normal release, and then an extra year for the developer's cut.
Yeah, interesting. And I forgot too, but it had a Kickstarter that was successful, and that was part of why you had to really crunch at the end, because that was some of the development money that was running out, and the release date was coming up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 5 years, but a lot of that is like you're learning as you go. So the games would go faster when you jump into them.
Yeah.
Are you going to count the Alisa DLC as another game? Because you told me that might be what you work on next, right? Some Alisa DLC.
Yeah. I might count it as another one. Yeah, because it's probably gonna feel like a whole game, because it's like a story DLC, so it's not just like a little bit of extra. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and by that time too, it's building up quite a bit of lore in the Alisa world, and it's starting to get beyond just when I first started talking to you. I was like, oh, we could do a comic. I'm gonna skip ahead. That was one little.
Yeah, this book. It's fixed now, at least.
Nice. Yeah, one of the funniest ones. You can see I'm kind of getting better as I go, but it takes me like hours to get good. But the one time, because I was playing it on a gamepad and I didn't realize it, but the button I was pushing was mapped to jump and fire at the same time.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so once I realized that was an issue, that was me. It wasn't even a bug. I don't think it was just my gamepad being weird. But then I just pushed the right button, and then everything was cool. But I was trying to fight that frog, and every time I ducked and tried to blast him, I would jump right at him, and I was like, I can't get past the frog because I don't know how to duck and shoot at the same time without jumping forward. I died like 3 times, and then I figured it out. But yeah, it's kind of fun playing live with playing a little live with chat, and I don't do that too often on my channel, but this was a fun game to do it for. It actually got me a little bit down a path. I did a few other games too, just indie. It got me kind of watching game jam games and what are the best ofs, and playing a few of them, and there was some kind of fun ones out there. But let me ask you then, so Alisa DLC, and it's its own story, and I was just talking a little bit about, I do see like there's a fair amount of fan art, and the lore is kind of awesome. Like, have you noticed that is like that people are kind of responding to it that way? Like, what's the fan art scene like? Has it been growing, or have you seen much of it?
The fan art, I think I saw most of it, at least 99% of it. It's very fun to see what people come up with, and what was the other thing you said?
Oh, I don't know. Just I don't know if
Um,
it's even a question. I'm kind of saying that Alisa
the
actually has a
lore.
cool. Yeah, it has cool
Um,
lore.
it's nice that some people made like these lore analysis videos of Alisa, because it's fun to see how people take it, like
Yeah,
how yeah, if people can fully understand what uh, I'm trying to say with the game.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I want to watch those. And yeah, you did create a game where it's fun. It's like that. It's sort of that simplicity and minimalism again, which is can be part of the Resident Evil thing, even because it's like a lot of files, that you're reading to contain a lot of the lore that way. And that's like part of the fun. Um, but yeah, so I was gonna ask you though, so maybe what's next is Alisa DLC, which even calling it DLC, it's almost you might even are you just gonna maybe you could almost just call it Alisa too, or is it like a little bit of a spin-off or
Well, for Alyssa 2, it should be Alyssa that you play as, but in the DLC, you will not be playing as Alyssa. It's the same. It's like running parallel with the
okay. So
with
it is
your
probably correct to call it DLC. It's just
yeah.
the fact that it's like it'll be a full game. But you can just let people know that. I mean, as long as people know that, um, then it is a cool title or whatever pitch.
Mhm.
Um, so then what's after that? Maybe.
I would like to do some sci-fi maybe, because actually I've always been really into sci-fi. Uh,
Cool.
it could also be like some other dark fantasy medieval game. Uh, I have an idea in every genre basically, to make a game. Um, like as I play other games, like old games, I always get this inspiration or idea for some game to make.
Yeah, cool. I can kind of relate to that too. What about when you talk about genre, there's genre like sci-fi or fantasy and stuff, but what about even the type of game? Because you've kind of done that twice now, which I think is a great way to do it. It makes me excited for what else you might do. But like for the example of it can be a Resident Evil style game or it can be a Metroidvania, is what you've done so far. Is
Hmm.
like for that sci-fi one, would it be like you want to try doing a first person shooter or do you want to try doing any other type of games you want to explore?
Um, I was actually working on like a strategy game that was sci-fi, but I kind of stopped working on it because it was a little bit more complicated and it had some weird bugs, and I got kind of tired of it. And I might make this game someday later. Um, I might like revisit this project and with more knowledge. Um, but I definitely want to do some first person games. Uh, the sci-fi game, it might be first person, but like I cannot spoil too much of the concept that I have in mind. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be kind of first person.
Okay. And could you say then for some of that, is it like a little more ambitious? Like it can't even be, or is it like it kind of can be categorized and you just don't want to say it? Or is it a little bit like you're inventing a new category?
Um, it's it's something in how much ambitious it is. I think something in between Alisa and this one. And it also depends on how much retro I want to go with it. If I want to make it work on old systems or not, and if I'm using a completely different engine for it.
Yeah,
because it would be nice.
Interesting.
Yeah, it would be nice if it could run on like Windows 95 or something. That's like a dream.
Yeah,
to make an actual retro game.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So that it's interesting, like, because some of your inspiration and creativity, it's like almost, I wonder if it's almost like three things. It's like it's the how retro it is kind of a big decision. What sort of like type of game is a big decision, and then the genre itself. Maybe there's more things, but the genre, like, is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi? And you're kind of trying to, if you haven't done one yet, you might want to try that, and you're going down the list and checking off these projects by exploring those possibilities. That's a little bit like how I do comics too. But yeah, I'd be definitely excited to see you do a sci-fi thing. And and even like, I guess the ambitious level, that's another kind of way to rate it, how ambitious. And what's funny about that is super high ambition is not necessarily good. Like, kind of quote unquote, the way you're talking about it, low ambition, that kind of means like beautiful simplicity. And that's kind of part of the fun too. I almost would get more excited by the way you're talking about it if you're like, I'm really not ambitious with this one at all. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to play it then. But the flip side too, like if you were like, oh, I'm really ambitious, I'd be like, yeah, I want to see. And I wonder how that maps to comics. There's some similarities. Like, it can almost be a red flag with comics if you hear someone say how ambitious they are with a comic, because part of you want to just be like, dude, just make a comic, like just make a fun story. What are you trying to? You're trying to change the world or whatever. Like, it's going to inevitably, it might end up sucking if you try to do that.
It sounds like I don't know. It sounds like you get high expectations, and mostly these expectations cannot be met. If somebody says like they're making something very ambitious, then your expectations become very high. But maybe it cannot meet these expectations.
Yeah, that's true. And that'll even happen, like, in comics, if people say, I'm making the new Frank Miller thing or the new Alan Moore thing. Those are like things everyone knows, like, just never say that, even if you think it. Like, it's okay to be confident, but don't never tell anyone, because it can only be bad in multiple ways. Like, but the main ways, if it'll kind of get people rolling their eyes, or it'll set up expectations for it to fail. And I wonder, with a game that probably is a similar thing. But yeah, it's like, what's kind of fun is within even like Phenix Corrupta, like, it's sort of perfect. Like, it's just a perfect little game. And I guess people could whatever nitpick things, but and part of why it's able to be perfect is because it knows what it wants to be, and it's not trying to be too much, Does that we're getting close to an hour. We'll kind of start wrapping up here, and there's more. I'll just interview you again in 6 months to a year if you're down, and check in with you. But I always want to. I'm always really curious about kind of like your creativity, and it's hard to even pose questions like that. It's hard to answer them. We're getting to some of it, because you do seem like a super interesting, creative person, but. What was I? Oh, so I was saying, in that process of like simplifying the game so that you can actually make it kind of perfect for what it is. Does it start from a point of being relatively perfect, or is a lot of it like you're taking stuff out and you're making it more simple as you go?
Yeah, probably that. So I make something, and while I'm making, I see that the clock is ticking, and I'm like, I'm just gonna remove some stuff. Otherwise I'm not gonna get there.
Yeah, there's a saying for that. They say, kill your darlings. Have you ever heard that?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's like a writing thing, but that applies to all sorts of stuff. And it's funny when a lot of times, actually in movies, sometimes they'll do director's cuts where if it's like Spielberg or something, and yeah, something was out. Oh, the biggest example is Donnie Darko. So Donnie Darko is this kind of cool movie, and
Yeah, I like that movie. Not a lot of people
yeah,
like it, but I like it.
yeah, nice. And so I could see that you would like that. Yeah, but so that movie, there's a director's cut. The director's cut is like worse than the regular movie
Yeah,
because
yeah. I think I remember it. Is
yeah,
it? I saw like that they show like how he died from this machine or
yeah,
something.
yeah. They like show like the aliens or something. Like in the
Oh,
original, it's
really?
not explained, and it's like a lot of fun how it's not really explained, and you're just like, damn, that was crazy. But then in the director's cut, it's like, yeah, it was aliens, and then they teleported him through time and blah blah blah. And it's
Really?
like, yeah, it's like, why did you add that? You like ruined your own story. It's like it was good that you had to take it out. I think Star Wars might have had a little bit like that too, but it wasn't that they added it later necessarily, but it was like all these limitations of the technology are kind of what makes it cool and gives it like the look. Even the way they were forced, not really forced, but with what is it? Is it ILM when they're shooting, they're taking footage of the X-wing versus TIE fighter space
Mhm.
battles, and like there's a very specific way where they could do that, and they could only do it that way, and where then like later on they use CGI and they don't have those limitations of using models, then all of a sudden they just put like a million spaceships on the screen and you don't really know what's happening. Um, Whereas before it's like it was a lot more fun when it's like Luke and Han in the Millennium Falcon and they're at the turrets and they got to take out 5
Mhm.
X-wing and they count them as they go kind of thing. Or the in
Yeah.
two even in Star Wars it's like the run on the Death Star is like a straight corridor, and that's kind of because the model had to be built that way for it to kind of work for the movement of the camera. And it's like if that were made today, they would have made it like a winding maze with all this crazy stuff, and it's
Mhm.
just not it's not as cool. It's like the simplicity is
Yeah.
part of what makes it cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Like sometimes something simple is better than overcomplicated.
Yeah,
Or like a world that is kind of limited in what you know, um, is better to like follow. You don't like get like you're not drowning in lore or something.
yeah,
It can also be very alienating.
yeah. You kind of more tease the audience, and they know some things, and it's kind of fun to think about, but you don't necessarily answer all the questions.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word alienating twice, and like that's an interesting kind of cool word to think of it in terms too of the audience. You don't want to alienate them, and
Hmm.
there you can. It's on like yeah, there's sort of a sweet spot. Like if you throw too much lore at them, that they don't like that. If you throw not enough. When you were mentioning the first time, it was even when in Phenix Corrupta, like if you start with her already powered up, that's like a little alienating where it's kind of more
Hmm.
fun for them to experience the growth and start as a regular person.
Yeah.
That's cool. What made me think that though is that's a little bit potentially, I don't know if this is like true, but I think of that as more Japanese influence, and then American influence would be like, no man, just start her like super powered up. Like it's kind of worse, the American version. But then you being from Belgium, this is can be like our last question. It's kind of a crazy question, but I've thought of this in comics in the past that, and I don't know exactly how true it is, but I kind of feel because I really like Belgian comics,
Hmm.
and there's Japanese comics manga, then there's American comics, and there's Belgian, and it almost feels like Belgian comics are right in the middle. They're like half and half, and that's
Hmm.
kind of part of the fun of them. And uh, do you feel like that's true at all, especially even like with games and stuff? Like being in Europe, is it like kind of a mix of America, or is it pretty much kind of its own thing, just kind of randomly? Or
Um, I think some European games tries to like too much to be like American games. I think sometimes,
yeah,
um, but the biggest example of something different is like Slav games. There are you can feel this. This is very different, and I kind of like these games. I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but you know, like Czech games or Russian games, or I like these
That's
games
cool.
because they're very different.
Yeah. Can you think of an example of, is that like The Witcher maybe, or?
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like they are like less held back by they have to be like moral or something, or like, okay, can we really show this? So it becomes more like art where there is no limitation of what you can show and what not. Um, like one game I played that was really amazing was Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna write this down. What about Pathologic? Have you heard of that game? That reminds me of what you're talking
Yeah,
about a little bit.
I played the first game a little bit. I only one evening actually. I wanted to continue, but it's a game where you have to read a lot. Um, and I tried the second game, but for some reason I couldn't get into that one. Um, Maybe it wasn't the right timing because I heard a lot of good stuff about it. And I kind of liked the first one more than the second one, even though I
Yeah,
didn't play much. Um, but it's probably something I might revisit someday.
yeah, cool. Zed says Eurojank. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but
That's
cool.
like European janky games or something.
Yeah. I guess that's what he's saying.
Like I can imagine.
um,
I can imagine Cyberpunk was quite something at the start, but for some reason I really liked the game even though it was very broken. Sometimes I like broken games. It's like an extra layer of fun, maybe from a developer's perspective.
yeah, that's fascinating too. I can kind of relate to that with even with comics. You can appreciate kind of any level and kind of get it, you kind of experience it from behind the scenes as you're playing it a little bit.
Hmm.
Cool. So it's a genre, but yeah, I'll check that one out too. Zed. Yeah. So 16 people watching. Thanks everyone for being here. Nicholas says Narwhal and Casper working on a project would be god tier. Yeah, the thing is, Casper doesn't need me. He's like an amazing artist in his own right, and his wife helps him. But if you ever expand to get the budget with the contractors, I could possibly help a little bit. But then we might try and do the comic too. Is the other thing. So
I
that will be
I
fun.
can well I think my like help in writing is it doesn't take me any time. Um, if it was like if I was like making a game for somebody, that would be a little bit too much of my time. But like writing or testing or anything like that that's yeah, that's kind of free.
Oh, okay. So you're
There is
saying
no effort for me.
open door for a little collabs. If
Yeah.
I ever make a game or something, you'll take a look, or definitely vice versa. If you ever need play testers or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we'll stay in touch, and I'll plan on I like keeping track of what you're up to. But everyone follow Casper on Twitter. That's the main way I do it. And but then I'll plan on trying to interview you again in whatever, like 6 months or so, and just
Yeah.
see what's up, because it's always fun chatting and about projects and about creativity and games and stuff. And I feel like we kind of scratched the surface. It's like hard to think of questions, but I'm like, oh, we could keep going, but we're kind of just I'm kind of feeling around in the dark. I'm not even sure what we're talking about, but
Hmm.
um, yeah. But yeah, so thanks for joining me, Casper, and chat. Thanks for being here as well. I'm gonna
No
end
problem.
the stream here in a second. I'm just gonna click it. Casper, do you want to any kind of outro, like where people should follow you besides Twitter that you want to shout out, or any projects to look out for?
So you can find everything, like all the progress of what I do on Twitter. Um, my website is very outdated, so do not check out my website. Um, Instagram a little bit. Every now and then I post what I posted on Twitter. Or my wife does it because she sometimes manages that one. And yeah, that's about it. I guess in 6 months I will be already working on my next game, or maybe it will almost be finished, hopefully.
Cool. Will that be Alisa DLC, or will that be the one after
Yeah,
that?
probably DLC. I hope it
Okay.
will only take 6 months to make.
Yeah. Yeah, it should go, hopefully it'll go faster, but who knows how much faster. But
Yeah.
because you know all the process and stuff.
Hmm.
Cool. Yep. Well, thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just hang out for a second behind the scenes, Casper, and I'll say hi, but I'll end the
Yeah.
stream here. I'm gonna click the button.
Okay.